Returning to his father's ranch, the cowboy faced the widow he never forgot. The gunfire echoed through the canyon just as the sun dipped below the ridge. 8-year-old Lucy Harper pressed herself against the wagon wheel, her small hands covering her ears, but nothing could block out the screams. Her mother's voice cut through the chaos, then suddenly stopped. Her father's revolver clicked empty. Then silence. The kind of silence that swallows everything whole. Lucy opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Not then, not ever again. The raiders left her there among the wreckage, thinking she was dead like the others. She lay still until the stars came out, her throat locked tight, her voice buried somewhere deep where even she couldn't find it. When she finally moved, she crawled past her parents without looking at their faces. She couldn't. If she looked, it would be real. 3 days later, a grizzled miner named Jack Sullivan found her hiding in an abandoned mine shaft near Copper Creek. She was covered in dust, her lips cracked from thirst, her eyes empty as a dried-up well. Jack had come looking for a silver vein that the old maps promised, but found something far more valuable and infinitely more broken. He tried to coax her name from her, but she just stared. He offered her water, and she drank without acknowledgement. He wrapped her in his coat, and she didn't resist. It was like holding a ghost. Jack had been alone in these mountains for 6 years, talking only to his mule and the echoes of his own voice. He wasn't equipped for this. But leaving her wasn't an option. Jack carried Lucy back to his cabin, a rough structure built into the mountainside with timber walls and a stone chimney. Inside, it smelled of coffee and leather and loneliness. He set her down by the fireplace and watched as she pulled her knees to her chest, becoming as small as possible. Days passed. Jack learned to read her silences. 1 blink meant yes. 2 meant no. A turned head meant she wanted to be left alone. He stopped asking questions she couldn't answer. Instead, he talked. He told her about the mountain, about the veins of silver that ran through the rock like frozen rivers. He told her about his life before, about mistakes he'd made and people he'd lost. He never expected responses. He just filled the silence, because silence in that cabin felt like death. Lucy listened. In the mornings, she'd watch Jack prepare his gear, the methodical way he checked his pickaxe and lantern. She'd follow him to the mine entrance, staying just inside where the light still reached. She never went deeper. Darkness held too many memories. One evening, Jack came back bleeding. A support beam had collapsed, catching his shoulder. He tried to hide it, but Lucy saw the way he winced, the red seeping through his shirt. She rushed to him, her small hands pulling at his sleeve, her mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. No sound came. Tears streamed down her face as she tried and tried to push words out, but her throat remained locked. Jack knelt down, ignoring the pain. He took her hands gently. "It's all right, little one." "I'm all right. You don't need to speak. I understand you just fine." But Lucy shook her head violently. She needed to speak. She needed to tell him to sit down, to let her help, to not leave her like everyone else had left her. The frustration built in her chest like steam in a kettle with no release. That night, Lucy made a decision. If her voice wouldn't come back on its own, she'd drag it back by force. The mountain town of Copper Creek sat in a valley where desperate men came to find fortune and usually found only hardship. Jack made his weekly trip down for supplies, and for the first time Lucy went with him. The town buzzed with activity. Miners shouted to each other. Saloon doors swung open and shut. Horses kicked up dust. Somewhere, a piano played off-key. Lucy gripped Jack's hand as they walked through the crowd. Too many people, too much noise. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Then she saw them. 3 men standing outside the general store. One wore a hat with a distinctive feather, the same hat she'd seen that night in a canyon, silhouetted against the firelight as her world ended. Her grip on Jack's hand tightened like a vice. He looked down and saw her face drained of color. Her eyes locked on something across the street. He followed her gaze to the men. One was laughing loud and careless. The man with the feathered hat. Jack felt Lucy trembling. He knelt down quickly. "Those men. You know them?" She nodded once. Her mouth opened again, and this time something came out. Not words, but a sound. A small broken sound like rusted hinges, but it was something. It was a beginning. Jack's jaw tightened. He'd been a lot of things in his life, most of them not good, but he'd never been a coward, and he'd never turned away from a debt that needed paying. He stood slowly, his hand moving to the revolver on his hip, the one he'd carried for 6 years without firing once. "Stay right here," he said quietly. Lucy grabbed his arm, shaking her head frantically. Jack smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Don't worry, little one, I'm just going to have a conversation." He crossed the street with purpose. The 3 men didn't notice him until he was 10 feet away. The one with the feathered hat turned, his hand already moving toward his gun out of instinct. These were men who lived by quick draws and quicker exits. "You got business with us, old-timer?" the feathered hat asked. His companions spread out slightly, a practiced movement. They'd done this dance before. Jack stopped walking. "That depends. You boys passed through the canyon road about 2 months back? Maybe had some trouble with a family in a wagon?" The air changed. The laughter died. The feathered hat's eyes narrowed. "Don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do," Jack said. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but his hand hovered near his holster. "I think you murdered a man and his wife and left their daughter for dead. I think you're the kind of men who shoot unarmed folks for whatever they're carrying." One of the other men, younger with a scar across his cheek, laughed nervously. "You calling us killers, old man? That's a dangerous accusation." "Not an accusation," Jack replied. "A fact. And facts have consequences." The feathered hat's hand moved. Jack was faster. His revolver cleared leather in a blur that surprised even him, muscle memory from a life he'd tried to leave behind. The shot echoed through the street like thunder. The feathered hat stumbled back, clutching his shoulder, his own gun falling to the dust. The other two froze. Jack's gun swung between them. "Your friend will live, which is more mercy than he showed that family. You boys have a choice. You can draw, and I'll put you down. Or you can ride out of this town right now and never come back. Your call." The scarred man looked at his wounded companion, then at Jack, then at the crowd gathering around them. The sheriff was already pushing through, hand on his own weapon. This wasn't a fight they could win. "We're leaving," the scarred man said, helping the feathered hat to his feet. "We're leaving right now." Jack didn't lower his gun until they'd mounted their horses and galloped out of town, a trail of dust marking their retreat. Only then did he notice his hand shaking. 6 years of peace, gone in a heartbeat. But some things were worth breaking peace for. Lucy ran to him, and this time when she opened her mouth, a word came out. Small and broken, but unmistakable. "Jack." He looked down at her, his eyes wet. "Yeah, little one. I'm right here." The sheriff, a broad man named Pete Collins, approached cautiously. "Jack Sullivan. Didn't know you could draw like that. Thought you were just a miner these days." "I am," Jack said, holstering his weapon. "But I used to be other things. Things I'm not proud of." Pete looked at Lucy, then back at Jack. "Those men killed her parents?" "Yes." Pete nodded slowly. "Then I didn't see anything here except a man defending himself and a little girl. You understand?" Jack understood. In places like Copper Creek, justice was flexible, especially when the alternative was letting murderers walk free. He took Lucy's hand, and they walked back through the town together. People stared, but Jack didn't care. He'd stopped caring what people thought a long time ago. Back at the cabin, Lucy sat by the fire while Jack cleaned his revolver, a ritual he'd neglected for years. She watched him work, and for the first time since he'd found her, he saw something other than emptiness in her eyes. He saw determination. "Jack," she said again, the word coming easier this time. Her voice was rough from disuse, like an instrument that hadn't been played in too long. But it was there. "I'm listening," he said gently. She struggled for more words, her small face contorted with effort. Finally they came, halting and painful. "Teach me. Teach me to shoot." Jack stopped cleaning the gun. He looked at this 8-year-old girl, this tiny thing who'd survived what no child should survive, and saw the fire burning behind her eyes. She didn't want to be helpless anymore. She didn't want to hide. "Lucy," he said carefully, "revenge won't bring them back. It won't make the hurt go away." "I know," she whispered, "but I won't be scared anymore." "I won't be weak." Jack set the revolver down and pulled her close. "She didn't pull away. You're not weak." "You survived. That takes strength most adults don't have. But if you really want to learn, if you really want to be able to protect yourself, I'll teach you. Not for revenge, for survival. Deal?" She nodded against his chest. "Deal." The next morning, Jack woke to find Lucy already outside, waiting with one of his old practice targets propped against a tree stump. She stood there in the dawn light, small but resolute, and Jack realized that saving her had somehow saved him too. He'd spent 6 years hiding from his past, but she'd given him a reason to face it, to use what he knew for something good. He walked out to join her, carrying a small pistol he'd won in a card game years ago. It was light enough for her small hands. "All right," he said. "Lesson 1. A gun is a tool, not a toy. It demands respect. You understand? Yes, Lucy said, her voice still raspy but growing stronger. Each word was a victory. They spent hours every morning after that. Jack taught her to hold the weapon properly, to breathe, to squeeze rather than pull the trigger. He taught her patience and accuracy. He taught her that power came not from anger but from control. Lucy absorbed every lesson like parched earth soaking up rain. Her hands steadied. Her aim improved. Her voice grew clearer. Weeks turned into months. The cabin that had once echoed with loneliness now held conversations. Short ones, sometimes stilted, but conversations nonetheless. Lucy told him about her parents in fragments, her mother's laugh, her father's stories. The way they'd been heading west to start a new life, never knowing they wouldn't make it. Jack told her about his own demons. About the men he'd killed in a war that made no sense, about the woman he'd loved and lost to fever, about the guilt that drove him into these mountains to hide from himself. There were two broken people learning to be whole again, one halting word and one steady lesson at a time. One afternoon, while Lucy practiced her draw, a rider approached the cabin. Jack tensed, his hand moving to his gun, but Lucy put a hand on his arm. "Oh, wait," she said softly. Her fear was gone. She'd learned to assess threats rather than assume them. The rider was Pete Collins. He dismounted slowly, hands visible. "Jack. Got some news from town. Thought you should hear it direct." "What kind of news?" Jack asked. Pete's expression was grim. "Those 3 men you ran off, they came back. Brought friends. About a dozen of them, all told. They're camped just outside town, talking about a miner who shot their friend, talking about making an example." Jack's blood went cold. He'd hoped they'd keep running. He should have known better. Men like that didn't forgive embarrassment. "When?" "They're planning something for tomorrow." The town's scared, Jack. Half the folks want to hand you over just to avoid trouble. The other half remember what those men did and want to stand with you. It's a mess. Lucy stepped forward, her young face set with determination beyond her years. "We can't let them hurt the town because of us." "She's right," Jack said. "I'll meet them. Alone. No reason for anyone else to get hurt." "No," Lucy said, louder now. Her voice carried weight, authority. "Not alone. Together." Pete looked between them, this grizzled old miner and this fierce little girl, and shook his head in wonder. Most men would run. Head deeper into the mountains, start over somewhere else. Jack smiled sadly. "I've been running my whole life, Pete. I'm tired of it. Besides, I've got something worth standing for now." He looked down at Lucy. "But you're not coming into town." "That's not negotiable." Lucy's eyes flashed. "You taught me to shoot. You taught me to be strong. You don't get to make me hide now." "I taught you to survive," Jack corrected. "And sometimes surviving means knowing when to fight and when to be smart. This isn't your fight." "They killed my parents," Lucy said, her voice breaking. "They took everything from me. If it's not my fight, whose is it?" Jack knelt down eye to eye with her. "Listen to me. Those men, they're not just coming for revenge. They're coming to prove something. They're dangerous and desperate, and that makes them unpredictable. I need you safe. I need to know that if things go wrong, you'll survive. You'll keep going. Can you do that for me?" Tears streamed down Lucy's face, but she nodded. "Promise me you'll come back." "I promise I'll try my damnedest," Jack said. It was the best he could offer, and they both knew it. Pete cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, you won't be completely alone. There's about 8 men in town willing to stand with you. Old miners mostly. Men who remember what it's like to fight for something that matters. It's not much against a dozen, but it's something." Jack stood, his decision made. "Then we'd better start preparing. Lucy, I need you to stay here. Can you do that?" She wiped her tears roughly. "Only if you take this." She ran inside and came back with the small pistol he'd been teaching her with. "For luck, and you have to promise to bring it back." Jack took the gun, feeling the weight of her trust in it. "I promise." That night, Jack didn't sleep. He sat by the fire, cleaning his weapons and thinking about the strange path that had led him here. 6 years ago, he'd come to these mountains to disappear, to stop mattering. Now he was preparing to fight for a town full of people he barely knew and a little girl who'd somehow become the center of his world. Life had a funny way of finding you, even when you didn't want to be found. In her small bed, Lucy lay awake too. She listened to the sounds of Jack moving around, the familiar clink of metal on metal, the creak of leather, Her fingers traced patterns on her blanket, and her lips moved silently, practicing words.
Real words. Full sentences.
Her voice was still healing, still rough around the edges, but it was hers again. Jack had given her that. Had given her back herself. She couldn't let him face tomorrow alone, no matter what he said. She'd survived too much to be left behind now. Dawn came cold and clear. Jack saddled his horse and checked his guns one last time. Lucy stood in the doorway, small but fierce, watching him prepare. He walked over and hugged her tight. "Remember what I taught you, about courage and fear?" "Courage isn't not being afraid," Lucy recited. "It's being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway." "That's right. Now you stay here, you hear? Pete's deputy will come check on you. You'll be safe." Lucy nodded, but her eyes held secrets. Jack saw it, but chose to trust her. What else could he do? He rode toward Copper Creek as the sun climbed, painting the desert gold and red. The town appeared in the distance, smaller than he remembered, more fragile. He could see the riders already there, dark shapes against the morning light. A dozen men, just like Pete said, all armed, all waiting. In the town square, the 8 miners Pete had mentioned stood in a rough line. They were older men, most of them, with bent backs and gnarled hands from years of working rock, but they held their rifles steady, and their eyes were clear. These were men who knew what it meant to stand for something. Pete stood at the center, his badge catching the light. "Jack, glad you could make it. Though I was half hoping you'd be smart enough to run." "Never been accused of being smart," Jack replied, dismounting. He tied his horse and took his place in the line. Across the square, the dozen riders sat motionless, waiting. At their center was a man in black, tall and lean, with the kind of face that had seen too much and felt too little. The leader, the one who decided this town needed teaching. The man in black urged his horse forward a few steps. "You the one who shot my man?" "I shot a murderer," Jack called back. "If that's your man, then yes." "That murderer was my brother," the man in black said, his voice cold as winter stone. "You put a hole in his shoulder. Cost him the use of his arm. I figure that's worth something. Figure it's worth your life and the lives of anyone stupid enough to stand with you." "Then come and take it," Jack said simply. He was done talking. Done explaining. Some men only understood one language. The man in black smiled, and it was the smile of a snake. "Oh, I intend to. But first I want you to understand what happens when you cross the Dalton gang. I want this town to understand." He raised his hand, and his men drew their weapons. The miners tightened their grips on their rifles. The air crackled with tension, that moment before violence when everything hangs in the balance and time seems to stop. Then a shot rang out from somewhere high. One of Dalton's men jerked and fell from his saddle, clutching his leg. Everyone froze, looking for the source. On the roof of the general store, small against the sky, stood Lucy, Jack's pistol in her hand, smoke still rising from the barrel. "Lucy, no!" Jack shouted, but it was too late. The fight had begun. Dalton's men opened fire, and the square erupted in chaos. Jack dove behind a water trough, returning fire, his heart hammering not from fear, but from the sight of Lucy on that roof. She was firing methodically, just like he'd taught her, but she was so small, so exposed. The miners scattered to cover, their rifles barking. The air filled with gun smoke and flying lead and the screams of wounded horses. Jack took down 2 riders in quick succession, old reflexes kicking in like he'd never stopped. He moved from cover to cover, always keeping one eye on the roof, on Lucy. She was holding her own, impossibly, her small form darting between chimneys, firing and moving, firing and moving. He'd taught her well. Too well. A bullet splintered the wood near his head, and Jack rolled, coming up to see Dalton himself bearing down on him. The man in black had dismounted and was walking through the chaos like death itself, a revolver in each hand, firing with terrible precision. One of the miners went down, then another. Pete took a bullet in the leg and crumpled behind a horse trough. Jack and Dalton locked eyes across the smoke and fury. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. Jack stepped out from cover, his gun raised. Dalton did the same. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the 2 of them. 2 men with too much blood on their hands, adding more. They fired simultaneously. Jack felt something burn across his ribs, but his shot found its mark. Dalton staggered, a red bloom spreading across his chest. He looked down at it in surprise, then back at Jack. "Huh," he said. Then he fell. The fight went out of the remaining gang members. With their leader down, they broke, riding hard out of town, leaving their dead and wounded behind. The miners cheered weakly, exhausted and bloodied, but alive. Mostly alive. Jack ran to the general store, taking the stairs 2 at a time, his ribs screaming protest. He found Lucy on the roof, sitting with her back against the chimney, Jack's pistol still in her hand. She was crying, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. He sat down beside her and pulled her close. "I told you to stay home." "I couldn't," she gasped between sobs. "I couldn't let you die. I couldn't lose you, too." "I know," Jack said softly. "I know, but God, Lucy, you scared me half to death. You're 8 years old. You should be playing with dolls, not shooting outlaws from rooftops." "I'm not 8 anymore," Lucy said, and there was a weight in those words that made Jack's heart break. "I stopped being 8 the night they killed my parents. I'm whatever I need to be to survive. You taught me that." Jack held her tighter. "I taught you wrong then. You're a kid, Lucy. You deserve to be a kid. I'm sorry." "I'm so sorry I brought you into this." "You didn't bring me into anything," Lucy said, pulling back to look at him. Her eyes were red, but they were clear. "Strong. I was already in it. You just gave me the tools to fight back, to not be helpless." "Don't apologize for that." Down in the square, Pete was limping around, checking on the wounded. 2 miners were dead, 3 more injured. A terrible price, but the town was safe. The Dalton gang was finished. Jack and Lucy climbed down from the roof together. The townspeople gathered around them, uncertain. They'd seen what Lucy could do, this tiny girl with death in her hands, and it frightened them. It fascinated them. It made them uncomfortable in ways they couldn't name. Pete approached, his leg bandaged but his eyes clear. "Hell of a thing," he said. "Never seen shooting like that from someone so young, or so small." "She had a good teacher," Jack said quietly, "but she shouldn't have needed one. No child should." "No," Pete agreed. "But the world is what it is, not what it should be. You 2 saved this town today. Both of you. That counts for something." But Jack wasn't sure. As he looked at Lucy, at the blood spatter on her dress, and the hollow look creeping back into her eyes, he wondered if he'd saved her or damned her. He'd wanted to give her strength, but maybe he'd just given her more scars. Maybe some wounds couldn't be healed, only covered over. They'd buried the dead the next day. 2 miners, good men, who'd stood for something. And Dalton, planted in the outlaw section of the cemetery with a plain wooden marker. The feathered hat and his friends had fled town for good, last seen heading south toward Mexico. Good riddance. Lucy stood at the edge of the cemetery, watching the graves being filled. She'd spoken at the miners' funeral, her voice rough but steady. She'd thanked them for their courage, for standing with Jack. The words had come easier now, like a stream finding its course after a dam breaks. But Jack noticed she still went quiet sometimes, withdrawing into that silent place where pain lived. After the funeral, Jack and Lucy returned to the cabin. They didn't speak on the ride back. Words felt inadequate. The mountain air was cool and clean, and the sun painted everything golden. It should have felt like victory. It felt like exhaustion. That evening, Lucy finally broke the silence. "Jack, what happens now?" He looked up from the fire he was building. "What do you mean? To us? Do we just go back to how things were? Like nothing happened?" Jack sat back on his heels, considering. "I don't think we can go back, little one. Too much has changed." "You've changed. I killed people today," Lucy said quietly. "I shot them, and they fell, and I felt. I don't know what I felt. Not sorry, not happy." Jack moved to sit beside her. "That feeling, that emptiness, that's your soul telling you something. Taking a life, even when it's necessary, even when it's right. It leaves a mark. You carry that forever." "I know. I've been carrying mine for years." "Does it get easier?" "No," Jack said honestly. "But you learn to live with it. You learn that the mark is the price of protecting what matters. And you make damn sure that price was worth paying." Lucy leaned against him. "Was it worth it today?" "Yes," Jack said without hesitation. "You're alive. The town's safe. Good people are still breathing. That's worth every scar, every nightmare, every moment of emptiness. You understand?" "I think so," Lucy whispered. "Jack, I don't want to shoot anyone ever again. But I'm glad I know how. Does that make sense?" "More sense than you know," Jack said. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Listen, I've been thinking. This cabin, these mountains, they were good for hiding. But maybe it's time we stopped hiding. Maybe it's time we found a place where you can be a kid again. Go to school, make friends, have a real life. Lucy looked up at him, surprised. You'd leave the mine? But the silver! I don't need silver, Jack said. I needed purpose, and I found it. In you. You're worth more than all the silver in these mountains, Lucy Harper. You're worth everything. You're not leaving me, are you? Leave you? Jack laughed, a sound that surprised them both. Kid, you're stuck with me. I was thinking we'd head west, maybe California. I hear there's good land there, good schools. We could start over. Both of us. Together, if you want.
I want, Lucy said immediately. But what about you?
You'll be all right, leaving all this behind? Jack looked around the cabin at the years he'd spent in self-imposed exile and felt nothing but relief. I'll be more than all right. I'll be home. Because home isn't a place, Lucy. It's people. And you're my people now. They spent the next week preparing. Jack sold his claim to another miner, got a fair price for it too. He sold most of his equipment, keeping only what they'd need for the journey. Lucy packed her few belongings, including the small pistol. She wrapped it carefully in cloth and put it at the bottom of her bag. She hoped she'd never need it again, but she wouldn't leave it behind. It represented too much. Survival. Strength. The voice she'd fought so hard to reclaim. Pete came to see them off. You're doing right by her, he said, shaking Jack's hand. That girl's special. She's got steel in her, but she needs softness too. Balance. You'll give her that. I'll try, Jack promised. Keep an eye on this town, Pete. Make sure the next batch of outlaws knows Copper Creek isn't easy pickings.
I will, Pete said.
Then he knelt down to Lucy's level. Young lady, you've got a gift. A terrible gift, but a gift nonetheless. Use it wisely, use it sparingly, and never let it define you. You're more than what you can do with a gun. You understand? Lucy nodded solemnly. I understand, Sheriff. Thank you. For everything. They left at dawn, Jack on his horse and Lucy on the gentle mare he'd bought for her. The mountains watched them go, silent and eternal, keeping their secrets. As they descended into the valley, heading west toward whatever waited for them, Lucy began to sing. Her voice was rough and unpracticed, but it was there, a simple tune her mother used to sing, about wildflowers and sunshine and hope. Jack listened, his throat tight with emotion. She'd found her voice again, not through violence or necessity, but through healing, through trust, through knowing she was safe enough to let her guard down, at least for a moment. The road stretched ahead of them, long and uncertain. There would be hard days. Days when the past came calling, when the nightmares felt too real, when the weight of what they'd done and what had been done to them felt crushing. But they'd face those days together. Lucy stopped singing and looked over at Jack. Jack, can I ask you something? Anything, little one. Do you think my parents would be proud of me? Or would they be ashamed of what I did? Jack thought carefully before answering. I think your parents would be proud that you survived, that you found strength when you needed it. But I also think they'd want you to find more than just strength. They'd want you to find joy, peace, love, all the things that got stolen from you. And I promise you, Lucy, we're going to find those things together. Promise? Lucy asked, and for the first time in months, she sounded like the child she was. Promise? Jack said firmly. Cross my heart. They rode on as the sun climbed higher, two survivors heading toward a new beginning. Behind them, the mountains grew smaller. Ahead, the world opened wide with possibility. Lucy Harper had lost her voice to violence and found it again through courage. She'd learned hard lessons about survival and sacrifice. But the most important lesson was still ahead of her, the one Jack would spend the rest of his life teaching her. That strength wasn't just about surviving. It was about living, about choosing hope over hatred, growth over revenge, connection over isolation. She was 8 years old, and she'd already seen too much darkness. But there was light waiting too, if she was brave enough to reach for it. And with Jack beside her, she was. She absolutely was. They stopped for lunch by a stream, the water clear and cold from mountain runoff. Lucy washed her face and hands, scrubbing away the dust from the road. When she looked up, she saw Jack watching her with an expression she'd seen before but never understood until now. Love. Simple, uncomplicated, fierce love. The kind that didn't demand anything, just gave and gave and gave. What? She asked, suddenly self-conscious. Nothing, Jack said, smiling. Just thinking about how lucky I am. To have found you. to get a second chance at being someone worth a damn. You were always worth something, Lucy said seriously. You just forgot for a while. But I didn't forget. I couldn't have survived without you, Jack. You saved me. We saved each other, Jack corrected. And we'll keep saving each other every day in 100 small ways. That's what family does. The word hung in the air between them, precious and fragile. Lucy tested it in her mind, rolling it around like a piece of gold, checking for flaws. Finding none. Yeah, she said softly. That's what family does. They mounted up again and continued west. The sun arced across the sky, and the landscape slowly changed, becoming greener, more forgiving. By evening, they reached a small town called Riverside, nestled along a wide, slow-moving river. It was nothing like Copper Creek. This place felt alive, welcoming. Children played in the streets. Women hung laundry in yards. Men worked in fields, their voices carrying on the wind. Jack found them a room at a boarding house run by a kind-faced woman named Martha. She fussed over Lucy immediately, commenting on how thin she was, how she needed feeding up. Lucy submitted to the attention with bemusement, not sure what to make of this motherly warmth. It had been so long. That night, in the small room they shared, Lucy lay in her cot and listened to Jack's steady breathing from his bed across the room. She felt safe. Actually safe. The knot of tension she'd carried in her chest for months loosened slightly. Not gone, maybe never gone entirely, but looser. Breathable. Jack, she whispered into the darkness. Yeah, little one. Thank you. For not giving up on me. For caring when you didn't have to. I didn't have a choice, Jack said gently. Some things, you just know. The moment I saw you in that mine shaft, I knew. You were mine to protect. To raise. To love. That's not a burden, Lucy. That's a blessing. Lucy smiled in the darkness. Her voice, when it came, was clear and strong. Good night, Jack. Good night, Dad. The silence that followed was weighted with meaning. Then Jack's voice, rough with emotion. Good night, daughter. Sweet dreams. Outside, the river flowed on, carrying away the past, bringing in the future. Two broken souls had found each other in the wilderness and had chosen to heal together. The road ahead would have its challenges, its setbacks, its moments of doubt. But they'd face them together, this grizzled old miner and this fierce young girl who'd lost her voice and fought like hell to get it back. In the darkness, both of them slept soundly for the first time in longer than either could remember. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new struggles, new growth. But tonight, they were simply family. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.